Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 7, Episode 4 of our weekly Q&A videos. If you are watching this for the first time, or early days and you haven't heard us say this in literally every single opening for the past, what has it been, like a year?
Yeah.
You can access this in podcast format if you're currently on the video by checking out the links in the description. So, getting into the questions and comments. The first one comes from Brandon C. And they say, I don't mind you guys talking about other stuff. It's actually entertaining and gives us a better connection with you guys and who you are. But a whole Q&A and no injustice talk? Sorry, but half and half would be great. Anyway, I love you listening to you guys talk about anything. Komoda.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so first off, we do appreciate the... This is, I think, feedback, right? Because
Sure.
It's clearly somebody talking from a place of actually enjoying the stuff.
Right.
And saying that, they would prefer a mix of half and half.
I know that Brandon enjoys it enough that he's supporting us on Patreon.
That's true, and Brandon C. also in the comments on a pretty regular basis.
Yes.
So we know definitely there's somebody who likes our stuff. So that's a good starting point.
Yeah. The practical parts are that if anyone wants more injustice content in our Q&As, then we need more injustice Qs.
Yeah, for us to A.
Yeah, it's not just the volume of questions, because we still get questions, but it's got to be something more than just asking about a specific fact or a yes or no answer. As we've been doing this longer, it's become more of a discussion, so it really needs to be a takeoff point, right? Like, it's got to be relevant in some other way, or just something that's more interesting. Well, maybe not more interesting. Maybe something that just takes...
Something that we can either discuss or can bring us to a different place that we can discuss. It's got to be something that there has to be a bit of a conversation around.
Yeah.
And yeah,
considering how little time we have for conversation lately.
That's true. And so yeah, unfortunately, we try to actually hit that sort of half and half, and we do for a lot of our videos, right?
Right.
But we can't always, and we have to make a choice of either having less content or talking more about other stuff.
But this is just it, right? I mean, we've been doing this for years now.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently. We've got I don't even know how to judge the amount of time, but in the last year we do almost an hour each week.
Yeah, and so that's at least an hour worth of work put in.
Right. The game hasn't had an update in a year. So I actually think we're still doing pretty good at running a channel that revolves around this one particular game. Never mind talking about them, because we still have the update every week, which is about, I don't know, somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be a good time for people to go through our past Q&A vids and watch them. I mean, some of it's interesting. I know I've said this before, that I don't know that I would go back and watch it, but sometimes it's interesting to hear your voice again.
Yeah. From
just 5 years ago.
Oh yeah,
and how things have changed over time.
Yeah, definitely there's a lot that's different now in a way that you wouldn't expect, considering how sort of on course we've kept things. Like, there's never been a big shift in what we do, I don't think. A huge shift.
Right. So we're more like the genetic, in influenza virus, just shifts a little. It's genetic shift instead of genetic drift. Which one is the bigger one?
I think drift is a small one, and then shift is the big one.
Right. So that's why every once in a while you get an influenza pandemic. Although this one is not influenza, what we're going through right now. Do you remember? All right, so do you remember when we started doing this and we thought, because we were doing only injustice content, and we thought we would do something special and did a Q&A for one of our milestones. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was like 1 million views or something.
It might have been 1 million views or like 10,000 subs or something like that.
Yeah.
We could go back to our first one and see why we did it.
10,000 seems like big. I feel like it would have been like 1,000.
Earlier? I don't know, maybe. I don't remember. But yeah. So our Q&A was sort of like a special thing, and then it just was like, easy to do, and it was more fun per amount of time spent than most of our other content.
Right.
Because our other content tended to have some, like, a little bit more clerical work, and this one was a lot closer to just put in some questions and then
just talking a bit, having conversation. Yeah, no, for sure, because, right now, I think we are close to putting out a video on Phantom Zone strategy with a couple of speed runs.
Yeah.
And a final crystal. But yeah, for sure, because it makes this. It comes back to the idea of burnout, right? Like,
yeah.
Right now, I know a lot of people are, at least in North America, and maybe even around the world, are in what they call isolation.
Yeah, or self-quarantine.
Self-quarantining, definitely social distancing, although I think the idea is sound, but the way it's been presented means that people aren't taking it seriously enough, and really it's physical distancing. Like you're staying far enough away from each other to decrease. There was one really good sort of illustration of that where they had a series of matches.
Oh yeah, I think everybody's seen that.
Everybody's seen that, yeah. But that's the idea, right? So it's these gaps that stop the. I mean, if we were all matchsticks and weren't moving around, that'd be easy.
Yeah.
But because we're bouncing around, I saw another sort of modeling of it where they have these little dots are bouncing around that infect each other.
Oh, was that Oh, who was that? 3 Blue 1 Brown?
I don't remember. I just know that's been used a lot.
If you just saw it on Twitter, it might be from 3 Blue 1 Brown. Okay. So there's different people have done stuff. I think the Minute Physics did an interesting video on that, and 3 Blue 1 Brown, and neither of them are epidemiologists, but it was just the idea of running a simulation that could mimic a theoretical disease transmission, so not specifically COVID-19,
right?
And then look at what the different outcomes were. And
so
the
they're
idea
using
of
the little balls randomly bouncing around to represent people who are infected and non-infected, and how much of a difference it makes to have the balls, a number of balls, depending on how many stay still and how fast things will spread.
Yeah, 3 Blue 1 Brown definitely did a really good one on that, where they simulated a ton of stuff. They did like if there was neighborhoods and movement between them, so you could imagine different populations that were relatively independent. If there was a central place that people went. Like a store, like something like that, and just a bunch of if social distancing, and then the different severity of social distancing, and then different percentages of people engaging in social distancing, simulating things with and without complete detection. So some cases going undetected, like they said, like if 20%, if 40%, like what does all these measures do and don't do, and how they affect things. And that was really interesting too.
I think one thing interesting about those models though is they look at what's happening now. They just say this is what happens with this model. What they're not looking at. And it's probably complicated, but it would be more useful. They looked at, well, what happens when they do it, and then they stop doing it.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen that, and that's a more interesting question, because it seems like it's being ignored a little bit, that only works that way if you do it indefinitely. Once there's a huge push, once people have either fatigued of the idea.
I always drop my phone.
Yeah.
And so that's today's drop, hopefully. 1. Yeah, so there's more fatigue.
Yeah, and then at some point, the people have to look towards getting back to normalcy, and so it won't last forever. And then the question becomes: so we've been able to delay stuff. Has there been enough change in the population so that when we let it go again, it's not going to just burn through and rip right through our capacity to handle it?
And so, unfortunately, this is an omen of things to come, Brandon. If you're looking for a more balanced discussion and answer your question about that, we've moved on to this.
So Brandon, I think for me at least, part of the problem is it's a combination of this guy's name is Ass Kicker, that we're fighting. I don't think he's going to be kicking our ass anytime soon. Yeah, we're just damage over typing him like crazy. No, but see, part of the problem is we have, is it a problem? We have a real life outside of this, and it's dominating everything. Like it's almost ridiculous how much like TV coverage is all this. Online, the forums that I'm on, they're all colored by this in some way. Even if it's not, like I'm on the grip board, and even though it's not about this, it's not about the pandemic, it sort of, at least there's threads where a lot of the action is people talking about it, and people arguing about it, and people saying, well, it's not a big deal, and some people saying, yeah, it is a big deal, and it's just, I don't know. And I guess if, like you said earlier, it's a question of whether we do this or we just do less content.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really good chance if I had to focus only on injustice and do nothing else, I don't have the ability to shift gears like that easily every time to be able to do this about just injustice. Unless, I mean, we do rely a lot on the questions, I think, right? As a
So I guess
a conversation starter.
If anybody else is feeling the same way as Brandon and they want some more injustice content, if you have any thoughtful injustice questions that we can answer and spend some time with, we'd be happy to do it, right?
Yes.
If it's the kind of thing that we can. It's just we do have to end up being a lot more sort of viewer directed in this domain, at least for a starting point, right? So if we don't have any injustice questions as a jumping off point, we can't ramble onto any other injustice topics either.
Right. It's been a year since we've had anything new.
Yeah.
And so Well, I think what would work the best is if somebody came up with something like a different perspective on stuff that is not just, I don't know what the...
I don't know where you're going with this one.
Never mind. You know what? Let's move on to the next question. Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah. So our next question comes from Victor Nikolai, and they say, what I hate most about especially Americans is this obsession to see racism everywhere from both sides. I mean, outside of your country and some left or right-wing extremist, who gives a shit about what Trump calls a virus? Is this good or bad what he says? I don't give a damn, and I just want to escape this orange man for 5 minutes without podcasts, news, series, films, or even games saying how I should like this president who does the same shit like the last 5 before with some different flavors. I like your channel, but please talk a bit less about Trump. This is free advertising for him.
Yeah, I doubt that there's much value in advertising. I mean, he was bragging just the other day about how he's got so many more millions of views with his daily news briefs about coronavirus and how he's doing better than the Bachelorette. And instead of worrying about the people who are dying, he's worried about his audience.
Ratings?
So, all right, so here's the thing. I guess there's a bunch of points, and some things I hadn't even thought of until just now. But
Yeah.
There's a certain privilege to be able to ignore that when something really bad is happening because you're removed from it. We are not American. We are Canadian, but we share the world's largest unprotected border between two countries. And so whatever happens in the States affects us in a way that doesn't affect any other country except that's not the United States. So we don't really have... I would love to be able to ignore Trump. I just don't think we can because they're our neighbors. Not only do we have the largest unprotected border, they're our biggest trade partner. So decisions that they make and decisions that affect the health of their people in this pandemic is going to either help us or screw us over.
And I think, too, the thing about like the seeing racism from both sides and nobody cares, it's interesting, right? Because I think that when somebody is in the position that the president is, they do actually end up informing a lot of public discourse.
Yes.
And so I think on an individual basis, one person saying something that sucks doesn't matter on average. But I think he is one of the people where saying things that suck and going out of his way to say things that suck, right? Like rewriting his press briefings to say things that suck. And, this is nowhere near the worst thing he's done, right? To call it the China virus. It doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of the things that he's done, this is one of the more innocuous ones. But that speaks less to how bad this is and more just to how bad he is.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent when somebody sucks enough that you just get tired of hearing about all the new things that he's doing and you just decide to tune out, is when you give them free reign to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
If nobody is talking about it, then it is not anything, right? It's when you address something, when you have somebody speaking entirely uncontested, unopposed, when nobody even comes out and just says, hey, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Right? The message that other people get is he's saying this and everybody's just sort of passively agreeing. Nobody cares enough to say anything about it. And I don't think it's necessarily our personal responsibility to be specifically the ones who are saying something, and it's not that a lot of people aren't saying things. But I think in general, it is still important, even if just for the other people that see it and disagree with it, or, for Chinese people who are sitting there going, really? Right?
Yeah.
To see that there are other people who are going, this sucks, and he shouldn't be saying that. And I think to some extent that conversation is actually a little important to continue being had. Again, it's not necessarily specifically our responsibility to have it, but I think in general, and I think it's also it's maybe not fair to say everybody's looking to find racism from both sides, because like the both sides argument is weird because you always have to caveat it going like, yes, I understand that everybody has imperfections, but we're not comparing two sides right now.
No,
it's not left versus right.
We're talking about
one dude. Yeah, this isn't even a Republican thing, because Republicans aren't calling it the China virus. Like, that's not, or Chinese virus. That's not a unified front either. And we're not just coming after him because he's a Republican.
So here's the good comparison, actually. And we'll talk. I mean, we're in Canada. We live in Ontario. Doug Ford I think, made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
He pushed a lot of an agenda that people in Ontario didn't agree with. We specifically don't. That is very much pro-money, pro-capitalist, anti-big government, and right up until the point that he was... The last time he said, oh yeah, everybody should go on March break, have a good time, when people were already realizing that was a mistake, that was his last misstep. Up after that, he has been so good. So his base of support, I think, is very much similar to Trump's base of support. And where you see it, where you really see it is in a survey that was done that showed that the conservatives, people who voted conservatives in the last election, 2/3 of them believe the pandemic is not a thing. Whereas like less than 20% of either the Liberals or the NDP supporters do.
Wow.
And so it becomes that much more important what Premier Ford does.
Yeah.
Because when he takes it seriously, it is one less excuse that his support has for trying to pretend that it's not something and not dig in with everybody else and make the effort to try to minimize this problem.
Yeah, because we don't like his policies. We don't really like what it seems like he stands for as a person.
Right.
What Doug Ford has done pretty, like, across the board, in the past we have disagreed with, right?
Up until now.
But he's doing great here, and it's important to recognize it, and that it has absolutely nothing to do with his political affiliations that he's done something, because this is not partisan, or it should not be partisan.
Right.
And so the actions of Trump also shouldn't be partisan. For some reason, they seem to be at least a little bit, because being a little bit racist is not a partisan issue in my opinion. And I still think there are just people with, I think there's a correlation between people supporting Trump and saying the Chinese virus and partisan their political affiliation. I still don't think it is a partisan issue. I don't think it can be, because we don't live in a world where I think just across the board racism is a partisan thing.
Right. For sure. Like you can't live in a world and ignore the context, because then you really don't understand it. Like you don't know what's happening if you ignore that. And we don't have the luxury of being able to ignore what he says. So I guess maybe even addressing the specific point about the racism, right? What's interesting, the reason why it's worth talking about what's interesting is it's almost like racism is developing in a way that we've never seen before. So there's the whole thing called the model minority, and it's a bit of a myth. And what used to happen was people would justify their racism by saying, well, we don't dislike all non-white people. Look at these Asians, these Chinese, these Japanese, whatever, and look how good they're doing. This is the kind of people that we like that happen not to be white. So you can't say that we're racist. It's because we've actually got non-white friends or non-white people that we respect.
Yeah, we're only racist to these groups.
Right. And so that's called a model minority myth, because, and it's the idea that if you somehow are not overtly racist against one group, that any kind of bad actions that you take against another group, that's not really racism.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the argument that people say about well, I've got one black friend.
Yeah.
Right? Or I mean, but we see this. To me, the most striking example when somebody pointed this out to me was, well, a lot of misogynists are actually married, even when they're really overtly misogynist.
Yeah.
And so, and people sort of were aware of this, but they could sort of, it was almost like plausible deniability to say that, well, look at these Asian Americans or Asian Canadians or whatever. But it's really put the lie to that, because it doesn't really matter. It's when you see the kind of racism that's been directed at Asian people now in the midst of this virus.
Anybody who people think look Chinese.
Right. And they're sort of targets for abuse.
Yeah, we would say just Chinese people, but unfortunately racist people often aren't that
Can't tell
good
the
at
difference?
yeah,
Yeah.
good at just distinguishing.
So where it's really put the lie to that is that it's no longer a pedestal, right? Like that this whole model minority thing is not that they're elevating one and these others are lower only because they're not on a pedestal. It's that these model minorities have been used as a bludgeon against other racists, and it ignores all the history of how they came to North America, where some people were brought as slaves and some people actually chose to immigrate. And they were able to keep their culture and keep their heritage and come as, if not an equal, at least with the opportunity to be successful in a way that's different than when you are torn from your home country in chains. So that's it. But I think that the thing that hadn't occurred to me until we were just talking about it now was just the contrast, right? We don't like the conservative policy.
Yeah.
I respect Ford.
Yeah.
I don't like the Republican policy. I cannot respect Trump. And I think it's important to, like you said earlier, to call it when you see it, because otherwise people become complacent. And it's almost like the Overton window, right? Where you start talking about it and it's normalized and people have the excuse of being able to say, well, nobody's telling me it's wrong. It feels like everybody agrees with me.
Yeah. And I also think the one thing is I understand like the avoiding the orange man for 5 minutes part, just going back to what you said specifically. Yeah. I think the problem is, in what we've learned, is that you are right. We can't just talk about him.
Right.
Because, giving him media coverage is ultimately positive for him when it is just media coverage in a vacuum. So I think it's really important the way that we talk about him. Right. And I think just making fun of him or just saying Orange Man bad is really reductionist and not useful in adding to the discussion. That is just bringing his name up again in the discussion. Right. And you are putting people in the position where, people like to confirm their own beliefs. So if you're talking about him, people think about him more, and it keeps him more in their mind, and then people go along believing approximately what they already believed before in a lot of cases. Right. So I think what's important is that whenever we talk, we try to justify why we feel the way that we do. Right. And try to back it up and not just sort of say, this man sucks, right? Because I don't think that would be a useful message, and hopefully we do our best, and that people can understand where we're coming from, and I'm not under the impression that that we're necessarily convincing anybody who is neutral on or supports Trump into not supporting Trump, but at least we have that discussion. And, it's theoretically possible that somebody could stumble upon this and sort of see where we're coming from. Yeah.
Well, and again, it is really a conversation. I mean, it's probably not... I think there's a question that sort of touches on this later, right? But it is a chance, almost like a convention sometimes, where it's a chance to have not necessarily moderate discussion like you'd have at a convention, but a chance to specifically go over some of the ideas that have an impact on our lives right now, and maybe get a better feel for... I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I feel like it's important to continue to have this conversation with you, because I don't know how many years we're going to have this.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, it's just... This is not going to dox myself, but it's just that... my niece just got engaged to be married, and it just feels like time is really moving on. Like, it feels really slow for a while when nothing changes, and then when milestones in your life approach, it feels like then it's rushing right at you. Yeah. So, anyways,
there we go. Okay, our next question comes from Manish Gupta, and they say, "Can you guys provide the list of all the online weekly rewards, as I see that you know the pattern and you can always predict what will be the next online season reward?"
We can't predict it, but so far it's been good because the pattern is held. We can only predict it as long as the pattern holds, and what we're hoping the pattern is that it will not hold. Yeah. But we have done a list for our own benefit, and so this gets kind of complicated too, right? So YouTube's been good to us. We've been doing this for a while. We've got a small amount of ad revenue, not a lot actually, way less than I think a lot of people would think, but we've got a Patreon, and patrons have supported us for a while, and it feels like it would be bad to hold that content specifically for our patrons because of what we've been doing, right? Like, we've just been doing on YouTube. The only reason we have patrons is because they got to see us with no strings attached.
Yeah.
But I also feel like we owe them a little bit more.
Yeah, we want to try to be we want there to be at least a slight value add for supporting us on Patreon.
So that kind of information is not the sort of thing that we would have ever done on a video. So it feels like we're not taking away anything from the people who would normally watch us on YouTube, because we wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But then we've shared it with our patrons. So
as a Patreon exclusive, yeah.
As much of a thank you as we can, I think.
Yeah, for all the documents that would never have seen the light of day otherwise, it makes a little more sense for people to see sort of closer to behind the scenes, I guess.
Yeah.
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 So that's why, so we do have it up, but it's a Patreon exclusive.
Right. And again, I've struggled with it. I mean, it's easy just to say that's that, but it always feels like, I always feel like there's not a great reason to hold back stuff. Like we've just
to paywall stuff.
Yeah. And so it's more like something that never would have existed without them.
Yeah.
Instead of just holding something back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there we go. Our next question comes from Nimrat Abrahams, and they say, do you guys not get tired of the same thing every week?
Do we?
I think it's fresh enough. I mean, it's not bad, the routine. It's like a lot of things. Once you get into the routine of it, it's a lot easier. And I think when we actually end up sitting down and talking, I think the stuff surrounding it can be a little bit tedious sometimes.
Right.
Like
the process.
Waiting for it to export, the uploading it, making sure everything's right, the description, thumbnail, all that stuff. The little things, right? The you do footage for us.
Right.
And also a lot of the title and description work and all that stuff. So you can speak to that more than I can. But
yeah, it is a bit of a routine, but what else am I going to do? So I've got my job.
Yeah.
I think if I weren't doing this, I'd be probably spending more time reading, but it's gotten to be a bit of a routine, and it's a good excuse to have a conversation every week, and it doesn't feel like it's a lot of work once it's part of the routine.
The actual sitting in front of the mic part is pretty entertaining, though, always for me. I don't know. I find it pretty engaging. As somebody who, when I listen to a podcast, I have to be on my phone, playing a game or doing something else. I often double up in what I'm doing. This is pretty engaging for me to just do by itself. So,
Okay, so that's funny, because I don't actually do a lot of stuff where I could listen. All right, so there's a bunch of podcasts I want to listen to. There's one that you showed me recently about
Reply All.
Right, they had a spectacular episode about a guy looking for a song that he remembered from when he was younger that he couldn't find any record of it.
Yeah.
But the problem with a lot of that kind of content is I have to be focused, and there's not a lot of time where I'm just sitting around where I can have my attention like that. So when I'm working out, if I'm paying attention to something else, I end up taking longer, more time in between sets, and it takes me forever to finish. So I have to watch something that I can ignore every once in a while, where I can lose the train of thought and just let it go.
I have video games that I podcast to. So Binding of Isaac is one that I've had for a while. Recently, I've been playing through Darkest Dungeon, and I always have a podcast on while I'm playing that. Right. The episode, for anybody who's interested, is episode 158, The Case of the Missing Hit, on the podcast Reply All.
Right.
So there we go. That's a Gimlet podcast.
So do I get tired of it? I think some weeks I do get more tired of it.
Yeah.
But I'm playing anyways. And it's a matter of remembering to do some footage and making sure I don't overload the card on my phone.
Yeah.
The teams are still fun. I mean, every once in a while there's just enough difference. And it's that little joy of capturing... we used to have more of the fun videos, right? Remember when there was the one where... who was it? I think it was Reverse Flash that would disappear. If you interrupted his special at the right time with the Elsewhere Flash. Oh, you know who else could do that? Elsewhere Flash could interrupt... Apocalypse Dark Side.
Yeah.
That one where he stayed huge. Yeah, those are fun. So it's that every once in a while there's something like that makes it interesting, or just some new point. I mean, I don't know that I could go over the same ground over and over again unless there was something that changed. It just feels it was easier when there were updates, but in some ways it's a different kind of easy when we get an idea to do something and we don't have to worry that the idea is going to become obsolete in a couple months. And then there isn't that same kind of pressure to do it right away. Like that Phantom Zone stuff, it hasn't changed in more than a year as far as the things that you can do in the strategy. So it's still ripe, and I think we're probably really ready to get a Phantom Zone video done. I'd like to get it before the season is out, because I think there's only until Thursday, the Phantom Zone, this current Phantom Zone is
We'll
running.
do our best. We'll see if we can squeeze one out under the wire. I don't know.
Yeah, all right. So there's a sneak peek.
Yeah.
A teaser.
So there we go. Our next question comes from Sun Rayzer, and they say, how was the Red Sun team considered hacked?
All right, so this was back in... I'll link the video. We had a team when Breakthrough first happened, and we really pushed through on one account a full 60 level 10 team.
Yeah.
And so... Or sorry, not level 10, level 60 elite 10 team. And it was the idea... all right, so it's probably hard to remember back then, but at the time before there was Breakthrough, when you had a high stat team, which has, if you want to use the lingo of Injustice 2 mobile, it had a high threat level, I guess. Mm-hmm. Although it was never called that Injustice 1, and we have no idea how it's calculated, never mind having a number to put on a team. But then you would end up facing the same team over and over and over again. So the motivation was to see, okay, so let's push this team higher. And then instead of facing another team that might be stronger than yours when you're really working with the highest and stat and most powerful guys, then at best, they will only ever be as good as you.
Yeah, you'll be facing yourself, basically, if you have the highest possible stats in the game.
So that was the motivation. And the team they were talking about, and I think the link we'll put up will cut right to that particular fight, because I think there's maybe 15 minutes, but there's a fight in the middle of it. It's against Red Sun Green Lantern, Red Sun Batman, and Red Sun Solomon Grundy. Mm-hmm. And so the hacked part was that both the Red Sun Batman and Red Sun Solomon Grundy, they had no bars on their special 2s.
Yeah, so they only had special 1 and special 3.
Completely full. So Batman's passive is Red Sun Cunning, and all Red Sun teammates gain chance for unblockable and special 1 attacks. Mm-hmm. So do I even need to say it, or is it really obvious to everybody? The point that it's hacked and the point of it?
Yeah, is the reason why you're removing special 2. Well, it makes it you're using the passive, so you can't do special 2s.
Right, but you can
still generate power.
Right, so you can still get to 3 bars of power, and you can spend it, but only as a special 1 or a super. Yeah. And very rarely does the AI, at least at the time, very rarely did the AI do a super.
Yeah.
And so it's more of a subtle hack, and it's still a bit of a dick move, because if you're playing with it, if you're actually playing the team yourself, that hack is useless.
Yeah.
Because you can always decide not to do special 1.
Special 2.
Special 2. So you're using it to make a defensive team better, because the AI most often will do the hardest special possible with the power that they've got. So when they can't do special 2, they typically do special 1s over and over and repeatedly to take advantage of it. So if you're playing it, it takes away even the choice of ever doing it, but what you're doing is you're forcing the AI to play closer to an ideal strategy with this team. And the reason why I say it's a bit of a dick move is because you're not even playing anyways. What you're trying to do is get more defensive wins.
Yeah, to maximize your passive earning potential.
Yeah. And by cheating in a way that actually takes away... We haven't talked about this for a while, right? I mean, one of the reasons
why... The hacking cheating dichotomy? I think we have, not that long ago.
But the idea that even if there's cheats or glitches that are helpful but disadvantage other players, that make other players... Because remember, there used to be a glitch where you could just automatically skip a fight, get the battle points for it, and just do it over and over again not without playing, but just doing it so fast that it's almost as if you weren't playing.
Yeah.
And what that does is it really pushes other people down, because you're playing it, or you're accumulating battle points
at the expense of other people, because it's because online is a relative ranking system, right? So doing better means that other people are doing worse.
Right. Doing it without playing.
Yeah. for every person who did it, who got up to a high category, there was one person in every category underneath who was right at the threshold who got screwed over.
Right.
So it was a low number, but a non-zero number, unless you were definitely going to get into that top whatever percent anyways, right? There was like 5 people, or however many categories there are, who got bumped down 1.
Right. And I guess you could make the argument, I've seen people make the argument when they're against cheating, that's effectively what happens if you cheat and get more because then your team is better. And so for the amount of time that you're playing, you're getting more points than you would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And I can see the point of that argument. And it's the difference, I guess, is that there are people taking advantage of those glitches anyways.
Yeah.
And if we just leave it, then it means that if we don't publicize them, then it means that the people who know about it will have a big advantage. But an advantage in a way where they still at least have to play.
And it also, that is true up until the point that you put enough hours that you would have a team that good anyways. Right? So we've long since surpassed the point where we're not getting maximum battle points that we wouldn't have been getting otherwise.
Right.
So now, all it is doing is giving us more variety. So there's that sort of in-between point where it is potentially giving you stuff that you haven't worked enough for, and that if you were playing at the exact same level, you wouldn't have, right?
Right.
But that's a question that subsides, right? That consideration is only an issue for so long. Whereas if you're hacking and you're skipping battles, that's always an issue.
Right. And I want to point out that with this team that we're playing right now, this is another teaser. I believe this is probably as close to being an ideal team for motoring through Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the slower runs, but I thought it's still worth showing because it's going to end in crystal. So even if we finish with the content, if we finish talking, it's probably worth letting it play out a little bit just so you can see the last crystal get the reward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there we go. Our next question comes from Kenneth Tong, and they say, "What are your names? I've been a viewer for some time, and I just realized that I don't know your names. Also, what's the relationship between you two, if you don't mind me asking? From what I've seen, I've picked up more of a Guardian/Sun vibe, but feel free to correct me if I am wrong."
So what's funny, all right, so you know what this reminds me of as a question?
What?
Fleabag. You never know her name.
Oh, yeah.
She's just Fleabag.
And a lot of people's names in the series you don't know.
I guess so, but the only one that really matters to me, I think, is when it's the start, right? Like this is the show that revolves around her. You know where else you don't know the name?
Where?
Once.
Oh, really?
It's boy and girl. Like the credit, like the actual credits at the end is boy and girl.
Huh? Interesting.
Or is it man and woman? I can't remember. It might be. I mean, he is a lot older than she is.
Yeah, I mean, just for privacy reasons, we don't say her names. I guess it doesn't probably matter that much anymore, but we've gotten into a habit of it, and there's no real reason to say her name, so we still don't.
So this is one of those questions I was saying earlier where we've been asked this a lot. Every once in a while, it feels like it's worth revisiting, if for no other reason than that the situation that led us to the original decisions, they change, and I wonder if... All right, so you said it, right? Originally it was for privacy. Also, when you were younger, it seemed like it was smarter to maybe shield you from some of the kind of abuse that you could get being on YouTube.
Yeah, we've gotten close enough to doxing ourselves enough. I think, we just don't need that level of personal information out there. At some point, my name might come out on this channel. I don't really care. You have to not do it for a different reason.
Yeah.
For a little bit more confidentiality related to your work, where it's better. But, yeah, for me, it doesn't matter the same way. We just started...
I feel like a spy.
One...
I feel like, where you can't let people know.
That's true. You can't be made, right?
I can't be made.
Yeah. The one thing, a way that people have referred to us, iProfit used to say Abbott and Costello. So if you're looking for a way to differentiate us, I can be Abbott, you can be Costello. Just because I talked first, and I guess Abbott's name comes first.
Who's the straight man?
I don't know. Were either of them?
I think one of them was. Like the skinny guy was more of the straight man and the serious one.
In this case, I think we're sort of both the straight men here then.
It's true. And we're not that funny.
Yeah.
To anybody except
ourselves. When you have two straight men, it's just no jokes. It's just people responding normally to normal situations.
And this would be maybe a good time to advertise our... Like, because we kept it sort of secret for a long time.
Yeah.
Then we talked about it in one of our older videos. It might be interesting to find it. It's the one, I think, where we were reviewing Neil Gaiman's book of nonfiction essays.
Yeah. We've also, I mean, we've talked about our personal relationship a while. It doesn't matter. We'll say it again now, right? We're father and son.
Sure. But podcast number 0.
Episode 0, yeah.
Episode 0, where it doesn't exist anywhere else in any other form.
It's only in podcast. Yeah, we talk more about us. So if you want to get to know us a little better, the longer that we've gone on with this, the more we've sort of just talked about us in our own stances. But if you're looking for that sort of side of things, you won't get our legal names, but you will hear more of that sort of type of thing.
You'll get a better idea of where we're coming from.
And stuff that's also, I think, a lot more important than what our names are, honestly.
I think so. I think so. It's not like... I think the chance of us actually meeting anybody in real life ever who know us as BDCKR is pretty much slim to none.
Yeah, but it would be interesting if we ever did.
Well, so here's the thing, right? Like, I mean, I'm not worried that I'm ever going to become the Canadian Prime Minister or the run for it, so I don't know that I ever have to worry about this content coming out and me having to justify it, like to defend it. Mm-hmm. But I think you are at a stage in your life where there's at least the potential. I mean,
that I'm Canadian Prime Minister.
Sure, or just that there's something where you want to you're going to be looking back at it. You're going to be vulnerable because of the things that you've done online. That you have an online presence that can be linked to you as a real life person easily.
I think it's also good though that the only things I've said here are things that I've been willing to say in front of my dad. Probably reduces the chance that any of the opinions that I've discussed here are gonna come back to bite me. You know?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm your regular however many years ago being like a teen on the internet, right, for the first time and just being totally unfettered and able to say whatever. I think having some degree of supervision in what comes up, and it's not even like you've stopped me from saying anything. It's just the stuff that I naturally would not say in front of my dad on the internet is maybe a little useful.
Yeah. So this is the big part of the value to me of doing this, right? So there is that little bit of work in preparing stuff. I mean, I'm playing it anyways. There's time in the washroom where I could be reading instead, but I'm playing the game, and that's the footage. Mm-hmm. That's not easy to get tired of. But
yeah, the older you get, the more all of your free time is centered around commuting and toilet.
It's true, although with the pandemic right now, it's almost ridiculous how good traffic is. Like, now I know how much of a contribution the other cars are making to how long it takes me to get to work. I can drive on the non-toll road. Normally I take the toll road a big chunk of the way home. And in the mornings, I have to get up really earlier to get in. Instead of taking an hour to get to work, it takes me about just under 30 minutes each way.
Wow.
Yeah. So, silver lining about what's happening right now. But yeah, so I think as you get older, right, like the stuff that really matters to you, I mean, there's a reason why you hear people talk about, bran flakes and fiber and stuff, because your perspective changes so much and stuff that you end up thinking, what the heck? And then you care about it way more because I don't want to say, it's not that there's no joy. It's just that these things have such an impact on your quality of life.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that you have control over, because there's other things, actually. There's other health problems that maybe have a bigger impact on quality of life, but you have less control over it in the moment that you do. Like, let's say heart disease. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to do way more changing your life than you do to make sure you don't get constipated, right?
Yeah.
Like, an extra tablespoon of ground flaxseed is all it takes. And
oh my God.
Heart disease is medication and
eating healthy and
exercising and all that stuff too, right? So, yeah. Because physically, I mean, all right, so we haven't done an exercise video, not so much an exercise video, but a physical testing video in more than a year, I think, right?
Yeah. It's been a while.
And I don't know that I necessarily want to do one soon, but I'm realizing that maybe in the last year, recovery is way more difficult. Like stuff where I could push myself before and just, maybe I missed a day, I could just make up for tomorrow and just cram a whole bunch of exercises together and not have to plan for so much recovery time. Can't do that anymore. I'm getting hurt more often. So I think that last video with the chin-ups might actually be my peak. So it's not awful. I mean, I like to pretend that I'm still young, but I don't know that there's at some point you got to sort of hit the top, and it really does.
It's all downhill from there.
It does get downhill from a certain point.
Yeah. There we go. That's a weird energy. I mean, we finished that question. That, you know what? If you're looking for more detail about us, Kenneth, that's probably
yeah,
a certain insight. See, it's you don't know your name, but that's I think a look into your psyche a little bit.
Yeah, that's more information than my name.
Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of time. I thought we'd let it play out, but I want to mention a couple things that I just realized this week that's interesting. And it's pandemic related, but not just focused on, oh my God, we're all going to die. Yeah. Which I think is a really bad vibe, not only because it's defeatist and not useful, but because I don't think it's true. I think what we're doing is actually making a difference. But what's interesting is, all right, so Italy's been hit hardest. I think they've got more deaths and maybe more cases. Oh, not more cases anymore. I think U.S. might actually be catching up or passing them.
Wow. Okay.
And China, we never know how accurate their information is because they've got a much more authoritarian government that has. Well, even if they don't have control
on the news.
Yeah, they have tighter grip for sure. So, but Italy has the world's number 2 ranked healthcare system. So. I think I said this last week, right? When you want to cut through the noise of all the numbers and stuff, who's got more of this, who's got more of that, then is it per capita? You know, if your population is bigger, does that mean it's more significant?
Yeah.
And if you want to cut through all the noise, what it comes down to, and I said this last week, was that the first world country, and now that I know that there's number 2 ranked healthcare system in the world, a country with what would otherwise have been a really good healthcare system.
Yeah.
Is doing battlefield triage.
Yeah, they're totally overwhelmed.
Right, and so that is going to have a huge impact on their mortality or their case fatality rate. And so what you see in all these other countries that are looking like they're panicking is that they are trying to avoid that threshold where your caseload exceeds your capacity to deal with it, because once it does, then your mortality rate goes right through the roof.
Mm-hmm. And when you also have enough people sick that your measures aren't stacking up, that is when more people start getting sick faster, right?
Right.
When you don't have space in the hospitals and you're saying, unless you think you're going to die, don't come.
Right.
Then all of a sudden that's when you have more people out in the public, more people behaving in ways that are sort of based in panic, right? And based off of lack of resources as opposed to being able to actually implement a system properly.
Right. One other interesting thing I learned this week, it feels like this week, if I'd mentioned it, I'm going to apologize. You'll let me know.
I'll tell you, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a small village in Italy that's been hit particularly hard. And one of the measures that they looked at was, so people have been complaining that because everybody's not testing as much, then we're not seeing as many of the mild cases. And I'm going to put to you that we're actually missing a lot of the serious cases too. So there's a little village in Italy, the name escapes me right now, it's one of the hardest hit. They normally have about 35 deaths a year over the time frame that they were looking at it from the beginning of the pandemic until the point they were counting. And they were able to attribute directly another 31 extra deaths. Did I mention this?
You haven't.
To coronavirus, to COVID-19.
So almost double.
Yeah, it gets better than that. Well, not better. It's even more significant than that.
Impactful.
The next thing they looked at was excess deaths. So the number of deaths they expected was 35. Instead, they had an extra 31 that were attributed to coronavirus.
Yeah.
But they actually had, over that same period, 162 deaths. So there were almost 100 deaths in excess. So more than so 160, that's like 5 times as many deaths as they would have expected over that time frame, of which only an extra doubling of it, instead of the 5 times, only an extra doubling of it was directly attributable because people were dying at home, it was not being attributed to coronavirus because they weren't testing enough. They were just dying.
Wow.
So this is what we're trying to avoid when we're taking such drastic social measures, and why a lot of countries are willing to take the huge economic hit, because people in power and people I believe are relatively smart think that it's actually would be worse if we just let it run its course and not do something now. That losing as much of the country's economic output this way by choice is going to be better than if we just let the pandemic run rampant.
Yeah, and this has obviously been brutal, and it hasn't been good on people with disability and accessibility needs. But one thing that's interesting that people are saying is potentially good, I sort of like, it's a cold comfort, but it's better than nothing, right, is that a lot of what we are seeing here is socialist policies being put into place. We were seeing accessibility needs being met, like being able to work remotely,
right,
having online options, right, having for a lot of different things, right, for my lectures, right, having them uploaded in an online format so you can like pause and play and change speed and stuff, right? And so all these things are being forcibly put into place, and if this lasts, then these systems are going to be put into place and then gotten up and running and refined.
Right.
And then, hopefully at the end of this, there's going to be a lot of services that are going to be a lot easier. This would be a good time for businesses who would not justify all the effort and cost to start something for accessibility measures, to spend that little bit of extra energy once it's already in place to continue something and have a lot of accessibility measures put in place.
It is so much harder to take away something from people who've had a chance to try it than it is to convince them that they don't want it.
Yeah.
So then, again, that's totally universal healthcare, I think, to Americans. Hey, Americans, if there's any American listening, you need universal healthcare, and this is the perfect example of why.
And so, that's hopefully, potentially, if there can be anything that's a bright side, is one possible bright side is that there might be more accommodations for people and for the kind of people who need it. And this has also been to different extents, brutal on people with mental health concerns or accessibility needs, because, you have maybe a schedule that you're used to that helps you.
Right.
And having that kicked up, right, and messed up, having different access to sort of resources, right, in the community, a lot of stuff like that. So it's not that this event itself has been good on people with accessibility needs.
Right. It's more just that it helps to be able to look at stuff and not think, oh, it's all gone in the crapper, that there is still the proverbial silver lining.
In a vacuum, a lot of these changes are good accessibility considerations, and potentially not all of these are going to go away.
Right. It's just a shame that the cost was so high to get them.
Yeah, but if this lasts a while, though, really these systems will have been tried and true and worked around, right? And if this is like, however long it is, there's going to be a certain point where, businesses and schools and everything need to implement these in a sustainable model, right? Because it's going to be long enough that having it as sort of held together with like duct tape and twine is not going to be, enough.
Right.
So if you end up with a clean, sustainable model at the end of this, then we might be able to keep it, and that'd be something. That'd be good.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So we are out of questions. We've only got maybe a couple minutes left. I think this will be close to enough, if not enough, to get the last crystal and see what we get. So is there anything? I missed last week complaining about all those inside traders in the American government.
You got 2 minutes. You think you can do it justice?
I should probably mention it. I mean, it just comes back to the idea that it boggles my mind. I mean, you can't really compare the two parties in the States, and it's just weird to me, like, because it's not like we're that much better to have a third party, but we still have a third significant party that has an influence, even if they don't come into power, has an influence on the balance of power. It shapes
discussion.
Sure. But I can't imagine any party just willingly ignoring the kind of insider trading that's happening, where you're head of some intelligence branch. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
We're done. You're getting intelligence briefings about how serious things are going to be. You publicly reassure people, oh yeah, it's not too bad.
And then you sell all your
while
stocks
you're
and
selling
related
millions of dollars worth of stocks that you haven't touched, that's way more than you've moved in the last more than a year. And then before you actually come out and say, hey, American people, general public, you got to be real careful, you got to take care of yourself. Before you do that, you're at a private talk with donors.
And you tell them to get out.
Yeah, well, listen, get ready. Something big's going to happen.
Yeah.
You should take care of yourself. So that, insider trading is so hard to prove. This is way worse than what Martha Stewart went to jail for.
It's also very clear. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's what I wanted to say. So,
I think,
wake up, people.
One last thing, right in these closing seconds. I think what you're saying about the other parties is I think what makes it important to have more parties, and it's not necessarily just one extra one, but just having a different system, is when you've got more people that people have the option to vote for.
Yeah.
The other parties have to steal their voters if they want to win.
Right.
They have to find some way to appeal to people who might otherwise vote for a different party.
Right.
And that means that you end up having any one individual party also gets better because they do have a certain responsibility to a higher portion of the public.
Right.
To try to steal their votes. They have to try to get the support of other people, and they have to address people who would otherwise be able to go to a better option for them.
Right.
Yeah. So there we go. I think that's our closing. And so right at the end here, we've got some thank yous. I would like to give a shout out to Eliza Prerogative Caton. She just recently learned that she's been using that word incorrectly for a very long time. This shout out has been brought to you by the definition of the word prerogative, which is a right or privilege exclusive to a particular individual or class.
All right, I feel like Sesame Street now.
Yeah, I feel
this episode has been brought to you by Prerogative.
This is a mix of cyberbullying and Sesame Street.
Okay.
We'd also like to give a huge thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon.
So that's Consul Peasant and Edwoon supporting us at the highest tier last word. Mohammed Albshaiti, Your Message Here tier. Shawn, Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, and Brandon C., who support us on the credited level. And Chris Wolf and Scarlett Enby at the gratitude level.
Yeah, so thanks so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time. Komoda.